What does it mean that one of the recurring themes and subjects across the entire Kendrick and Drake conflict is the memory of Tupac? You know, the AI voice, the ring. Is it just that Drake was trying to get at Kendrick where he knew it would hurt, or is there something more? I mean, could it be tied into, and is it meaningful, that the one song that they truly collaborated on together, Poetic Justice, was named after a Tupac movie? I'm going to ask the question, maybe is it not possible to see the entire beef between Kendrick and Drake as a tug of war over Tupac's legacy, his memory, his, and I'm going to be using this word and I'll describe it in a second, over his soul. Maybe it could teach us something about Kendrick and about Drake, and maybe even something about Tupac and his complicated legacy. Because I believe it to be true that there are things about Tupac that Kendrick understands and that Drake could never. But also, there are things about Tupac that Drake understands and that Kendrick could never. Thank you for auditing the Always Positive New Music Review Show, hosted by a French professor who's got to throw out some caveats, because I know I'm going to call this video something Tupac Soul, and that makes me a little uncomfortable, even though I agree with my basic concept, obviously. So I had to pause it there to clear my throat. You're welcome. So the first caveat is when I'm saying that this is a fight over Tupac's soul, you know, I am a Christian. I do believe in the soul, and that's not what I mean. I don't mean the holy soul that will sit in heaven, okay? As Tupac himself taught us, only God can judge him, and that is not at all what I'm here to do. I'm using the term soul to apply to his spirit, his cultural impact, all the sort of intangible things about him that made him such a legend. Another caveat I need to throw in there is that you can probably notice that I am a white guy in his bathrobe at 7:20 a.m. in the morning, so there's probably a lot I don't understand. I like to quote my colleague Justin Hunt. I'm not in the position to properly contextualize the full meaning of Tupac, because I am not a black American, and I understand that, okay? It is impossible. There are things about who he is and what he represents that I simply cannot understand, no matter how hard I try, no matter how hard I study. This is where I like to draw parallels between my career as an academic, because I mostly study dead people from civilizations that have nothing to do with mine. Okay, I do a little bit of art history. I love Michelangelo. I study him despite the fact I am not a gay Renaissance Italian sculptor. Okay? But I am interested in Michelangelo, and I'm interested in the people that followed Michelangelo. I'm interested in Caravaggio. I'm interested in Cellini, and the way in which there was even some kind of debate over what is the soul of Michelangelo. Also, you know, even though I don't understand Tupac on some level I do, on some level I don't, you know, in the 90s we had these kinds of figures. In particular, I think a lot about Kurt Cobain. And the ways in which he touched me, and I understand. You know, there's as a anxious, alienated white guy, I understand that there are things that Kurt Cobain explained that specifically spoke to my life experience. What's interesting, though, is that no one's even trying to be Kurt Cobain. No one's even really invoking his soul in any meaningful way. I mean, I suppose Kid Cudi did, and that's about it. You know, like maybe Playboi Carti. You know, there are some rappers who sort of touch on him and his influence. But that's what makes Tupac so interesting, is he is still so present. I mean, I remember the day that he died. It was my 19th birthday, September 13th, 1996. I remember walking into my dorm room. I remember which wall I was facing. I remember who told me. Josh, thank you for bringing the tough news to me. You know, like I remember everything about that moment with great clarity. And I think a lot of people do too. And I think since that moment, there's been this effort to fill that void. What I hope this video communicates is the impossibility of filling the void. Just that he left such a big emptiness once he left, and that it's actually impossible for one person to fill that void, because he's so dynamic, because he was a master technician, because he was a legitimate Black Power revolutionary, because he was a crossover star and a pop star and a fashion icon and a real deal poet, and an actor, and a misfit, and an outsider, and the voice of a country, and the voice of a people, and the voice of a city, and the voice of a state, and an amazing, fully rounded entertainer. I don't think any one person is ever going to just be able to do all of that. So that's why I like thinking about figures like him as people whose memory is fractured, that there's no way to really see all of those things in one person because there were so many things in that one person. This is where I'm going to take a hard left turn into absolute nerdery, but I'll explain. Because when Drake bought that ring, that made me think of Harry Potter. Okay, now don't buy Harry Potter. Go to the library, okay, or bootleg it or steal it. I don't care. But it is a good book, despite the unsultry beliefs of the creator of the books. And in that series of books, it's all about Harry Potter and this magical dead super wizard, okay, Voldemort. And what made Voldemort interesting was when he died, he split his soul into 7 different pieces, 7 different fragments, in order to become immortal. A snake, a diary, a ring, a cup, a locket, like a little crown thingy, and Harry Potter himself, and a kid. So that's what I want to do now. I want to use this flimsy ass, nerdy, how dare you framing device as a way of thinking about this conflict and this collaboration between Kendrick and Drake over the spirit, the memory, the soul of Tupac. Now, the Dr. and Mrs. has been helping me with my technological support, so hopefully I'm going to be able to show you these different Horcruxes, okay, these different pieces, the objects, which I'm going to pretend have been given a piece of Tupac's soul. Is it working? No, it's not working. Of course it's not working. Why would it work? If it worked, I'd be happy. It's not working, so I'm not happy. Hey, I figured it out. It's awesome I'm able to pause this while I go. So, I'll show you the 7 Horcruxes right here. All right, we're going to have the movie Poetic Justice. We're going to have a free Bobby pin. We are going to have a mural in Compton, a yearbook from Baltimore, of course, the ring, a hologram, and then the 7th one is so silly you're just going to be mad at me. I'll show it to you there. If you know what it is, get ready to be upset. Okay, so let's think about this. Let's talk about this. And we're going to start, of course, with the first one, which is the VHS of Poetic Justice, the 1993 movie by John Singleton, which starred Tupac Shakur. I don't know, I picked the VHS because that's probably the way that Kendrick first saw it, and I assume that Drake also saw this movie, and I imagine that's the way that they watched it. Okay? So let's talk about this movie. What is the meaning of this movie, and why is this movie the title of the one song where they really collaborated? Now listen, there's 3 songs that they worked on together around this time. One was an A$AP Rocky song. We'll talk about that very briefly. Another was a Drake song that just has Kendrick, but this is kind of like De Niro and Pacino didn't work together, even though they were in Godfather Part 2. Like, they weren't ever in the same room. It was only with the movie Heat that they were, like, actually together, even though I think they filmed their scenes separately. But still, like, Poetic Justice is that kind of collaboration between them. And what I really want to focus on is there's this really important scene where Tupac is talking to his mother. Tupac's character's name is Lucky. So Lucky is talking to his mom. Now, he works as a postman. He's a successful working class dude, okay? And he's smoking in her kitchen. And she's like, I don't care what you do. I don't care what money you bring. You're not going to be smoking in my kitchen. You're not going to be swearing. It's a very sweet, funny scene of maternal care and severity, and it's great. It's awesome. But right next to Tupac, there's a book that says, the title of the book is right there. It's a little bit obscure, but it's right there. It says, What Women Want. And I think that's what this song is a meditation on. I think this song is really about the relationship between Tupac's character Lucky and women through the voices of Kendrick and Drake. So if you don't know the song, it's great. It's super catchy. It was one of the early singles. I think it was the 4th single. And one second, I have to turn that off. So the song itself has a sample from Janet Jackson. And I think that's really important because with that sample of Janet Jackson, we have her presence. She's one of the leads. The other lead is Lucky, played by Tupac. I think that this song, the best way to understand the song, and there's many ways of understanding the song, but as the movie in a song, Tupac and Lucky's conflicted relationship with women in song. Because when we think about Tupac, Tupac and Biggie are famous for having the beef and all that, but they were also friends. And Tupac actually put Biggie up on game and taught him the importance of writing rap music for women with women in mind. That's a really important thing. That's a really important part of Tupac's legacy, is his understanding that one cannot just write music for the dogs. You have to write some music for the dogs and some music for the ladies. And yeah, Kendrick gets that on some level, but for the most part, he doesn't. Not as well as Drake does. Drake really took this directive much more seriously. So the song is funny because it feels to me like a very conscious effort on Kendrick's part to do what he thinks is what women want, have a great chorus, have interesting themes of love and struggle. Of course, he's doing it in his Kendrick way, which is, pure genius and awesome. But at the same time, there's a kind of there's a catchiness to it. There's an emotional heart to it, which is not always present or is not always evident in other songs. Backseat Freestyle, that's the best song on the album, Good Kid, Mad City. But come on. That's not going to be a single. That's not going to get played on the radio. So let's really talk about this movie for a second before I talk about the song. Because, again, I think the best way to think about it is imagining each of them inhabiting Tupac's character for their verse. So the movie is an underrated, way underrated social realist masterpiece. So social realism is the belief in art that you need to depict real people living real lives, not the super rich, not the aristocracy, not the people in power, but actual real people living their real lives with all of the messiness and dignity and joys and pains there within. Okay? That's what this movie is. So when I first saw it in 1993 when it came out, directed by John Singleton, rest in peace, I was like, oh, I don't like this movie. Where's the dudes with 40s and guns running around the streets? Because I just seen Boys in the Hood and obviously Menace to Society. I loved this whole school of movies, and this was just not that. This was about a relationship. What's the deal? So I rewatched it recently, and it's so good. I had no idea how good it was because I watched it as an idiotic teenager, and I'm now much older. A couple of sort of side notes about the movie. It's got a lot of great rappers turned actors, So Q-Tip is in the beginning of this movie, of Tribe Called Quest, and he's awesome because he's the way Vince Staples acts, I think, is inspired by Q-Tip. Also, one of the greatest rappers turned actors, Tone Loc. Sorry, it's hard not to get the glare there. Tone Loc, great album, great pop artist, great pop rapper, great rapper, and he is just so good in this movie. You got Maya Angelou reading all these poems here, and the whole thing, it's not about crime. It's about Compton, but it's about the difficulty of this Tupac character, who's, he's conflicted. He's a good kid, but he's living in a mad city. That's really what the movie is about. It's about him and his friend Chicago, who are going to go on a road trip. They're both postmen. Okay, like Postman Pat, like Grover, they both work for the National Post Office. And they have to take some mail from from Compton to Oakland. It's a thin plot for basically a road trip movie. And Chicago has a girlfriend, and Lucky, played by Tupac, is going with Janet Jackson's character, and they're not together, but it's sort of a budding romance movie. And it's great. It's super real. Chicago is this rageaholic woman beater who's obsessed with his own image. He's sort of a foil to Tupac's character. Chicago is just insecurity personified. But at the same time, I don't think that Lucky, Tupac's character, is perfect either. And I think that's what's so important. We can read the song Poetic Justice as both being Lucky, but at different points in the story. Lucky has a secret kid, which he keeps secret for most of the movie. That's kind of Drake-ish. But also the way that he starts off the movie, when he starts talking to her, he's first of all, hits on her in a really gross way. Like he's just very, you should smile more, girl. I mean, that's his literal first line. I mean, you have to be really handsome to to say that line and not be just banned forever from someone's heart. But he says, you should smile more, girl, and he's like really kind of sleazy. And then when they're in the truck together, he's like, oh, I know who you are. You're one of those stuck-up feminists. I'm treating you nice, and yet you're mean to me. Real incel energy coming off of Tupac here. Real manosphere energy to start off. But as the movie develops, he becomes more human. He becomes more respectful of her and her autonomy and her position and her place and her power and her strength, which makes it a great movie about what women want. Because it turns out, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn here, women want to be respected and treated like equals, okay? And this is a movie in part about how Tupac learns to do that with her. And in Kendrick's verse, I think we have this ideal. And of course, one of the great contradictions of Tupac himself is his relationship to women. I mean, he at the same time is seen as one of the first rappers to truly understand how to take women seriously and write about them and their plight and to fight for them in songs like Dear Mama and Brenda's Got a Baby, But then at the same time, he's the I get around, wonder why they call you B-word, somebody who is convicted of sexual assault. Okay? Like, he is both of those things all at once. And I think that's what he is in this movie as well. And Kendrick's verse is very much the Brenda's Got a Baby Tupac. Very much the understanding, caring person. You live life, I'm quoting here, you live life on an everyday basis with poetic justice. If I told you that a flower bloomed in a dark room, would you trust it? Very clearly a reference to Rose from a Concrete, the poem by Tupac, about something beautiful coming from nowhere. Here it's not concrete, here it's a dark room. I mean, I write poems in these songs dedicated to you. When you're in the mood for empathy, there's blood in my pen. Better yet, where are your friends and them? I want to know you all. I'm in the mood for empathy. Hey, if you're out there and you're having trouble with your partner, empathy is the key. If they're saying I have a problem, don't say, here's how you fix it. Just say, wow, that sounds like an unpleasant problem. I'm sorry you're going through that. Would you like me to just listen? Or would you like me to try to help you? If you say that one sentence, would you like me to just listen? It just practice. Practice. If you're with a good woman and you say that sentence before you suggest anything, you will have a better and happier relationship. Okay? I'm just trying to give you $1,000 of game for $9.99. Okay? And that's what Kendrick is doing here. If you want some empathy, here I am. I want to know your friends. I want to know about who you are, okay? That's who he is. And then we get the Drake verse, and we're in full-on I get around Tupac territory. There's so much contempt for women in this verse, which is fitting with who Drake is. This is the kind of guy that Drake will become. I really hope you play this, because, girl, you test my patience. Right off the bat. With all these seductive photographs and all these one-off vacations you've been taking, clearly a lot for me to take in. Dude, take it easy. You don't own her. She wants to go on vacations. Okay, the amount of defensive, possessive energy that he is throwing off here. Young East African girl, you're too busy effing with your other man. That's interesting because Chicago's girlfriend there's a discussion about her being from Ethiopia when her family's from Ethiopia. I think the line is, how can she be from Ethiopia when she's got a brother named Lamar? I think that might even be the line, or a cousin named Lamar. Anyways, an interesting thing about the African diaspora and African Americans, so much in this movie. You got to see this movie. It's so good. So in that way, it does sort of seem that maybe they're going so far as to have Drake be the Chicago stand-in figure, who is a guy who literally leaves the movie after hitting his girlfriend. I was trying to put you on game, put you in a plane, take you and your mama to the motherland. I could do it maybe one day. This is Drake's whole position with women, constantly. He's going to put them somewhere. I'm going to put you in a plane. I'm going to put you in a fancy dress. I'm going to put you in a hotel. I'm going to put you in a Maybach. I'm going to put you in public housing when I'm done with you, okay? That's one of the lyrics that he says I'll never forgive him for. He is just going to constantly take women and put them places like they are books in a bookshelf. And sometimes it's something that they want, and sometimes it's something that they don't, but he's always in control of them. I'm trying to put you on a plane, okay? If you go on a date and someone's like, yes, I'm trying to put you on a plane, you should not finish out that date. You should just say, actually, I got to go. My friend's dog's on fire. And you just leave, okay? When you figure out you're going to need someone, when you figure out right here in the city, and you don't run from where we come from, that's poetic justice. And then he goes on talking about how you were so new to this life, but goddamn, you got adjusted. You know, he's like one of these weird passport bros. My Americanized Filipino wife. Check that out on YouTube. You've never seen that stuff. It's wild. You know, this concept that like, oh, you didn't know what to do with the fact that I'm a super rich guy who's taking you, but now you're getting used to it. Oh, you're one of those feminists. Really, he is early lucky in here. I write poems in these songs dedicated to fun sex, your natural hair, your soft skin, and your big ass in that sundress. Ugh, just gross. What are you doing that walk for? And the whole song, it's just this whole verse, it's just gross and disrespectful. And then we have Kendrick who comes back on and tacks on another verse that is respectful and loving. So this leaves Drake as something like Chicago, something like Early Lucky, a user, disrespectful, vain, and empty. And that's all in this song. And I don't know if Kendrick did this on purpose to kind of diss Drake in his own song by having such a fascinating counterpoint, but there it is. Interestingly, I think this is actually a lot like Kendrick and Drake in the song Fucking Problems from A$AP Rocky, which is just a weirdly misogynist song where they're both on there. Like, they're both in this mode. Of course, there's another way to read this, and I'm just going to talk about this briefly. There's another way to read this entire song that it's not about a woman at all, that it's about poetry. Because you could also argue that the movie itself is about artistic creation. That Justice herself sort of represents a figure in Lucky's life who helps her to understand the value and power of poetry because she is a poet in the story. Had to pause it again. There's going to be some more noise. The kids are waking up a little bit here. That's fine. So there's a part in the movie where Janet Jackson is talking to Tupac's character and talking about the importance of poetry and rhyme. And she says, you've got to have something to say. And it is very possible to read this entire song, instead of it being about a woman, but being about poetry, of course, the poetic justice that is there. So that is a way to think about it, almost as a prequel to the song Glory Off of GNX, you know, where my bitches may peen, right? He even talks about having blood in his pen. Okay? But there's another quote from this movie, which I think is an important one, which happens a little bit after that, where there's like a carnival and there's like a Black Power militant speaker talking about the problem with, and I'm not going to use the N-word here, but them these days. And it is that they are scared of revolution. Which brings us to the second thing, the second piece of Tupac's soul, which is this pin. Now, if you've never seen this picture before on the left, this is Tupac as a baby. His mom didn't give birth in jail, but was very pregnant with Tupac in jail. And during that time, so while he wasn't born in prison, he was born quickly after his mom got out of prison. His father was a member of the Black Panthers. She was a member of the Black Panthers. And this pin is trying to free one of the founders of the Black Panthers, Bobby Seale. And this picture of Tupac when he's a little chubby baby, cute little baby, was found in a Black Panther newspaper. And I think this image is a symbol, this pin is a symbol of the fact that there is an aspect of Tupac which Drake obviously could never touch on, which is that of being a real part of a Black revolutionary movement, a real inheritor of that movement. And that's a thing which very few rappers have even touched on in the last 25 years. Very, very few. I can't think of any in the mainstream who've done it with any amount of integrity or okay, some, but for the most part, it is Kendrick who is carrying this flame. And I think in a similar way, the next Horcrux, the mural of Tupac Shakur in LA, the To Live and Die LA, that's right there in Compton. And that's another one of these things that Drake could not possibly understand. Okay, he could not possibly understand what it is to be the real soul of a people and of a city, to be a hero, to have that sense of place, to truly belong to a community. You know, that's something about Tupac's lived experience that Drake will never understand, and something that Kendrick truly knows. Except, plot twist. This is a plot twist. Because I think it's true that a lot of places in California, you know, Compton and I think especially Oakland, consider him to be one of them. It's actually quite possible and even probable that Tupac himself did not fully believe or feel that sense of belonging. I'm not sure he did, which is why I want to go to the next Horcrux, which is my absolute favorite image of Tupac, the image of him in his senior yearbook. Okay? Mom, I don't want to wear this goofy sweater. Oh, Tupac, it looks very nice. You look very smart in that. Mom, I look like a dork. You look like a dork or not, you're going to wear that sweater for the picture. Can I pop my chain out? Okay, Tupac, you could do that, okay? Can't you see that? Don't you remember what it was like getting your class photo? You know, like, look at him there. Look at the insecurity on his face. At least that's what I read. I read insecurity. I read uncertainty. I read this desire to fit in. And I think it's really important that we not forget. Now listen. I do not want to get packed out by deleted here. I am not saying Drake is Tupac. I'm saying there's something about Tupac's lived experience with which Drake can truly connect with in a way that I don't think Kendrick can. And it's about the need to belong, this feeling of not fitting in. So Tupac moved from New York to Baltimore. Right? That was well, he moved from one place in New York to another place in New York, and then he moved to Baltimore. And when he was in Baltimore, you know, he took on a kind of rapping persona, famously as MC New York. Okay? Quite ironic, but that was his name. And when he was at this School of Fine Arts, he learned how to try to fit in. He always wanted to belong. And what we learn when we listen to him, when you listen to his quotes, is that he acted out of a place of sadness, out of a desire to belong, out of a feeling that he didn't belong. I'm going to quote this very important quote from Tupac, okay? Now, I could go on the whole, you know, Oakland put me up on game. That's how I learned. That's why I associate with Oakland, and that's true, and I get that. But let's think about this quote from Tupac. When I was young, I was quiet, withdrawn, I read a lot, wrote poetry, kept a diary, I watched TV all day, I stayed in front of the television. It was when I was in front of the TV by myself, being alone in the house by myself, having to cook dinner by myself, eat by myself, just be by myself, and looking at TV, at families, all these people in their pretend world, I knew I could be a part of it if I pretended to. So early on, I just watched and emulated, and I thirsted for that. I thought, if I could be and act like those characters, act like those people, I could have some of their joy. If I could act like I had a big family, I wouldn't feel as lonely. Is this not a heartbreaking sentence? Do you not see the pain and loneliness and desire to connect with people? And his belief that he had to counterfeit how he felt. He had to pretend. He had to fake it until he made it. When he played the role of Bishop in Juice, he apparently stayed in character for the entire movie. Why did he die? Why was he killed at such a young age? I mean, I've read a lot about it, and as far as I can tell, it's not because of Biggie. It's not even because of Diddy. It's because he was play acting as a gangster. He was. He had that sense of having a big family. Suge Knight and Death Row and the Bloods, you know, and he was a member of that, and he was playing along with it, and he knew how to play the role. And he got so deep in the role that he lost his life. I mean, that's the most straightforward way of reading his death, that he acted himself to death because he took on this role. I've read quotes from people who went to school with him who said, oh yeah, you know, whenever he'd go in and he'd start doing his rap thing, he was just like playing a persona. He was just playing a person. The same way he could put on a tutu is the same way he could put on a bandana, okay? Because he was a great dancer, right? He was a great ballet dancer. I don't think that this is I don't think that this is discounting him. I think this is where people get confused. They think that because people are not 100% real all the time, that their experience is not valid or important. I mentioned Kurt Cobain, and I have his guitar back here. Okay, not his actual guitar. This is the guitar that he designed. It's called a Jag Stang. I only wear white sunglasses because I want to be like Kurt Cobain. I really, he is sort of my Tupac, culturally speaking, right? But he was a poser. Nobody who really loves Kurt Cobain does not know and accept that he was a poser. He at least felt like he was a poser. He wrote about it all the time in his diary. And when he's wearing these t-shirts of other bands like, Flipper, the Melvins, or whatever it is, he's trying to feel like he's as cool as them. But on some level, he always felt that he was not the real guy that he was trying to be, that he was just a poser. One could argue that him taking his life, of course, he was depressed, but also I think on some degree he thought, well, this will make me real if I do this because I can't be a poser if I kill myself, okay? Now, all these thoughts are very complex, but for me, I connect more with Kurt Cobain because I know he was a poser than if I really thought he was really that guy. And I think that's what makes Tupac so fascinating, is the fact that he really was just such an amazing artist, a creative genius in acting, in poetry, in rap, in performance, in all those things. But also that feeling of not belonging was the fire that pushed that engine down the track. And I think Drake has that. I think Drake has that. And it's not just that he's an actor, but acting's important because it's pretending to be something that you're not. And Drake, since he was in a wheelchair Jimmy in Degrassi, has been acting. And then he was acting like a pop star, and then he went to the South and he pretended to be on his worst behavior. And who knows, maybe now he's pretending to be a manosphere grifter playing the slots, right? Like, there is a question, like, who is the real him? And the alienation he must have felt being black in a largely black, non-black society, and then spending the summers and, with his black family while feeling like a white Canadian, like that kind of mixture, that feeling of not belonging. I feel true, genuine sympathy, not pretend sympathy, not condescension, true sympathy for what Drake went through, because that is a very real pain that he experienced. And Kendrick didn't. That particular pain, that is a pain that is shared on some level by Tupac and Drake and not shared by Kendrick. Isn't that interesting? See, I'm not trying to just dunk on Drake here. I think it's fascinating. I think it's a really interesting thing. Now, of course, there's a lot of big differences because a lot of Drake's, being a Canadian celebrity is very different than basically having the entire drama of post-war Black America born into your veins and lived throughout your entire life. I mean, Tupac's sense of alienation and distance is a lot different and comes from a lot less privilege, but still, psychologically, it's still there. I mean, we need to spend more time with that MC New York thing, Like, that's how much he wanted to belong, that he tried to become a rapper and tried to use his outsider status to get some kind of... Anyways. But before you think I'm getting too sympathetic towards Drake, let's get to our next Horcrux. Let's get to the famous ring. The ring that Drake paid $1 million for to own. This ring of Tupac. Now, there's a video recently made by Abso-fucking-lutely. I enjoy her content quite a bit, her work quite a bit, and it's a lot about colonizing. And I think there's an interesting way of seeing this ring as being like an attempt to colonize, like to take the spoils, that this symbolic object of Tupac, once Drake buys it, it's as though he actually does have that Horcrux. He has that part of his soul, and he has some kind of claim over him. It sort of reminds me of the best scene from Black Panther, one of the best scenes in movie history, where Killmonger shows up to the British Museum and just starts taking masks back, okay? This is a very good, very important, very meaningful scene because, of course, he's being seen as a thief when he's really just taking something that belongs to him back. There is a degree to which Drake's colonization tendencies are shown in taking the money that he's gotten by colonizing rap, by dominating rap, by conquering the territory of rap, taking that money and buying this little piece of artifact. Okay, and that's why I think it's interesting that Kendrick himself in the pop out added that line to the song Euphoria, "Give me Tupac rings back, I might give you a little respect." Weirdly enough, it seems as though Kendrick understands, and he himself also puts importance into this ring, even though he shouldn't. Tupac hated rich people. He was, as the kids would say, based as hell. If you ever watch his interviews, he is talking about how rich people are the enemy and they are the problem, and how can you have a house with 5 bedrooms and only 1 kid when there's people who have no bedrooms. I mean, seriously, Tupac would throw up if he found out that people are paying $1 million for his ring when they could be giving that money to the poor. That's part of what made Tupac a revolutionary, because he understood that a lot of these issues don't boil down to race, they boil down to class. So, definitely give the ring back. That's true. If Drake gave the ring back and didn't sell it, he might get some respect. That's an interesting idea. Also, just not for nothing, but while we have my guitar back here, there's something so pathetic about buying this ring. And it reminds me of car collectors. So if you don't know, there's a lot of car collectors, and car collectors are mainly dudes who look a lot like me, a little bit older than me. They have a lot of dispensable income, white dudes who have a lot more money than I do, who take their money and they buy old cars. And sometimes there are old cars that are owned by people, and that raises their value. But the person who demands the highest premium is not the most famous person in the world. The person who increases the value of a car the most. It's not, Paul Newman. It's not Marlon Brando or Robert De Niro or whatever. It's Steve McQueen. Now, you probably know of Steve McQueen just because you've seen Cars and Lightning McQueen is named after Steve McQueen. But Steve McQueen is not a household name. But for middle-aged white dudes, he is Jesus. For insecure middle-aged white dudes with too much money, he is Jesus. And they will spend 10 times what a car's worth to own a piece of Steve McQueen. They will spend 10 times what a watch is worth to have a watch that was owned by Steve McQueen. It is this... Wait, there was that movie. Oh my God, there's that movie even where that happened. God, what was it? It was like an Eddie Murphy movie. It was took place in a skyscraper. It was a comedy. Tell me in the comments if you remember the name of that movie. That kind of plays on it. But that's the sort of... Sorry, that's my dog Bo walking around in the back. We've got too much life. We've got too much life going on in this house. I'm gonna try and get him back in his bed so he stops walking around. But the cruel irony is, the least Steve McQueen thing you can do is spend $10 million on a car that you didn't fix yourself, It's so pathetic. The same way that people spend millions of dollars to own old cardigans that Kurt Cobain wore. If you want to be like Kurt Cobain, actually buy a used sweater at Goodwill. That's how you actually do it. There's this weird sort of fetishization, this weird desire to acquire a masculinity, and that's what it is. It's a form of masculinity. It's aspirational masculinity. And I've written about how I've talked about how Drake outsources his masculinity to other men, he does it, especially 21 Savage right now. He's just you be the man for me, right? The man in a sort of normative sense, right? And the same way that the 60-year-old hedge fund manager who buys Steve McQueen's car is acquiring that rugged masculinity despite his doughy vampiric nature through that. The same way that I attained some level of Kurt Cobain's mysterious, awesome, outsider, stringy, junky coolness when I bought my Jag-Stang. The next Horcrux is another tricky one. This is the hologram from Coachella. Do you remember that? I don't even like keeping this image up on screen. Ugh. So they recreated Tupac in a hologram, and it was an offensive abuse, I think, of his memory. I think it was gross. I think it was flattening who he was. I think it was turning him into a sideshow. It was turning him into a carnival attraction. And I think Kendrick and Drake do the same thing. So I know that I believe that Kendrick was visited by the spirit of Tupac. Okay, I know that's silly, but I believe it. I believe that happened in 2010. When he says it, I think it makes sense. But does that really give him the right to take his voice in that interview and put it into Mortal Man on To Pimp a Butterfly? I don't know. I'm uncomfortable with it. I'm uncomfortable with the usage of AI Tupac. I'm not sure how different those things are. I know that one had the blessing of the Tupac estate. I get it. But still, Tupac could not consent to be on To Pimp a Butterfly, nor could he consent to be on Tailor Made Freestyle. So I don't know. I think there's an interesting thing, and there's an interesting uncomfortable similarity there that maybe some Kendrick fans might not like. Now, of course, it's very different taking Tupac's words and just quoting him directly and having him talk about the wealth inequality and about race relations, as he does on Mortal Man, versus using Tupac's voice to diss Kendrick. But, one of the things that Drake had Tupac say is, I would beef the whole effing game. And, maybe that's true. Maybe there is a kind of obnoxious, bratty, tricksterish nature to Tupac that Drake correctly used. Maybe Tupac would have found that funny and a cool, provocative thing to do, because we know that Tupac loved to be provocative. I don't know. The seventh Horcrux is just kind of a goof. I had to come up with the seventh. It's Playboi Carti. This has nothing to do with Kendrick or Drake, except to say that Playboi Carti was born on my 19th birthday. He was born the day that Tupac died. And, there's just the rule that if someone dies on the same day that someone's born, that part of that spirit goes into that person. So I don't really know, obviously, except to say that there's a youthful rebellion in Playboi Carti that I think is not in Drake and Kendrick. There is the fact that he's not understood by the older generation, which I think was true of Tupac during his day as well. Glamorization of smoking cigarettes. Got that on both of them. They both wear red and, kind of go with the blood gang. I don't know. Okay, I'm done with that point. That stupid point. There are a few things that, with those 7 items, still are not encapsulating the breadth of Tupac. There's things about Tupac that neither Kendrick nor Drake could possibly approximate. One is the charisma and beauty. He was just too handsome. Just like I mentioned Paul Newman earlier, like young Paul Newman, young Brigitte Bardot, young Tupac, just people whose beauty it just does not make sense. And then matching that with the charisma, that's just something which neither Kendrick nor Drake has. And I don't think anyone has had. I don't think anyone in pop culture has had. I don't know, maybe Timothée Chalamet? You know what I mean? Like maybe? You know what I'm saying? Like just people where they're just so beautiful, like, and so charismatic that you're powerless against it, I mean, how he was able to change fashion just by his existence. Like the things that he did became fashion just by doing them. He wasn't even trying to change fashion. He wasn't monetizing it. He didn't have a brand of cigarettes. He didn't have a brand deal with a cigarette company. He didn't have a brand deal with a bandana. He didn't have a brand deal with, thug life apparel, okay? There's a similarity between Tupac and Drake. They're both litigious. Yeah, you see, Drake is suing UMG, and Tupac also had a famous court case, which he instigated, which very few people talk about. He sued the police and won. How is this not mentioned in the first paragraph whenever we talk about Tupac? He was jaywalking, and the police hassled him, and he swore at them, which is his right, and he was beaten. And he sued the police and won $42,000. Okay? There's talking the talk, and there's walking the walk. Speaking of talking the talk, the other thing that neither of them could do is interview skills. Tupac is the best interview subject I've ever seen. Like, I watch a lot of interviews. I watch a lot of old interviews. I think John Lennon's close, like people where you watch them and you just get drawn in and like they just are able to go on tangents and tie it all together and just be so exciting and just like zoomed in and just like so smart and creative and witty and biting and acerbic and kind and compassionate, all that charisma, it just all comes together, and neither Kendrick nor Drake are particularly good interview subjects. Couple more weird notes from the movie. The song Between the Sheets is in Poetic Justice. After that, Notorious B.I.G. would take that song for Big Papa. Was Biggie inspired by the Tupac movie? I don't know. The Great Isley Brothers song. Another thing, they say in Poetic Justice, yamps. Now, for those of you who know To Pimp a Butterfly, of course, there's the famous What's the Yams? And yams is a reference to African literature and African culture about the importance of sweet potatoes called yams and how they symbolize prosperity and wealth and success and all that stuff. And I get that. And that's beautiful. And that's part of what makes To Pimp a Butterfly so wonderful, his connection to Africa and African Americans. But also, it's not nothing that in the song Poetic Justice, they say, what's the yamps? Yamps stood for Young Tramps. If I have any West Coast black viewers who grew up in the 80s and 90s, did anybody say yamps in Compton? Did John Singleton make up yamps? Because I've never heard it anywhere else. To conclude, I want to talk about the other collaborations. So I've talked about Poetic Justice. I've talked about Fucking Problems. Now let's talk about the Buried Alive intro on Drake's album. And this is what I think is most interesting, is it's a song where Kendrick is rapping as Drake. Kendrick is rapping about the emptiness of fame and money. Kendrick is rapping about what will eventually take over Drake's life and make him such a powerful and negligent force in culture, in hip-hop culture, in pop culture, that Kendrick himself will have to take him out. I quote Kendrick rapping as Drake in the same way he rapped as Tupac in Poetic Justice. So I blame it on Mr. OVOXO, the reason why I'm breathing all the vanity I know, the reason why my best friend says she loved me more than life, but I live a double life, I need to let her go. The reason why the highlight was when he said, you belong to the people and you outside. So dig a shovel full of money, full of power, full of pussy, full of fame, and bury yourself alive. Then I died. I think Kendrick is talking about the metaphorical spiritual death of Drake, which he will accelerate in, almost a decade later, or more than a decade later. Right? Anyways. Phew. All right, so there's my little thoughts. It's not like an official paper or anything. I just have some thoughts about these ideas, about Tupac, about Kendrick and Drake. Please add on anything else you find interesting in the comments. There's a lot more. There's so much to Tupac that I can barely scrape the surface. So I'm now going to watch this video back and hopefully it recorded all, because I got the Toby and the dogs and the Bo and the... See, there's Bo. There you are, buddy. You were walking around, huh? You were walking around a little bit, Bo. That's all right. There's Toby. There's Toby. Hey, Toby. It's for all the dogs. All right. Till next time, where's the camera?